Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue for our weekly conversation on issues that are important to us. Today, we wanted to focus specifically, in view of what is going around in the world, on artificial intelligence and how it could affect or how it affects our general life. And then there are specific issues that get translated. To talk about this subject matter, I have the real pleasure of inviting and having two brilliant minds from India, and I respect them as brilliant minds, the youth, the demographic dividend of India, Dr. Abhishek Puri, who is a neuroscience and a head surgeon, I would call it, the brain surgeon. And the other guy is equally brainy, Dr. Ankit Shah, a PhD, a scholar, a geopolitical analyst, thinker, a strategist, God knows what else he is not. So having said that, I want to tell people that here is an example of India's future. And I wanted to dwell upon the artificial intelligence part specifically, because we know that it is a modern tool where the traditional quote unquote control and domination of the masses continues with a new tool. So as it is, democracy is a very chaotic form of governance. How do you see, in the light of what is happening around the world with reference to economy, politics, and elections, how is AI controlling the minds of people? And I will give, in terms of alphabetical order, I will give Abhishek the first shot because he leads Ankit by having a name called AB instead of AN. So Abhishek ji, go ahead and take your first crack at the concept here.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Vibhuti ji. Thank you very much, Ankit ji, for joining us over here for the collaborative brainstorming session on this very burning issue. First of all, I would just like to clarify that I'm an oncologist, but
Oncologist, sorry. Fine.
yes, but
My
I also
apologies.
look after the neuro-oncology, and I have I would say, a rather morbid, obsessive interest in artificial intelligence. The reason why I started looking at it was that AI is, as a subset of machine learning, is going to have a profound impact on every aspect of human activity, whether it's economic, whether it's medical, whether it's philosophical, ethical, moralistic. And right from the 60s, 70s onwards, this has been the trend of discussion. But the reason why AI has exploded in the recent, maybe past decade, is that because of the quantum of investments that are happening, because of the venture capitalists and the big tech that has gotten very much interested in the entire AI brouhaha, if I would say that. And that is the reason why AI is going to take the center stage in the next decade. And also the fact that AI is going to impact the, as you mentioned, the democracy as well as the political aspect. So you look at the entire spectrum of human involvement or human activity. AI is going to be the center defining piece of how we interact with the machines and how we interact with anything around us. So you can see it in various forms, shapes, sizes, and we can discuss that as the discussion goes on later. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek ji. Ankit ji, मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहता था कि we will continue our dialogue in Hindi, English, and English, as the saying goes. The point of the matter is that we do a lot of work in turnaround strategies in our company, in our business, and one of the things that we talk about is that technology has now become a commodity. Everybody can have access to same technology, just like you and I have, whether we can. So effective use of technology would be critical for proper decision making. See, one of the things that AI does, that it is unbiased towards decision making, it gives it. But I have a question as a non-tech guy. As the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. So the algorithm of AI is made by people like you and I. So how do we design that algorithm is critical for decision making. So tell us your thought on it, that how will a normal person get controlled and manipulated in his or her decision making because of the algorithm fed into the process. So, whether it is political, economic decision making is key because people always have challenge making a decision. Go ahead. You are mute.
All right. Audible now?
Yes.
Yeah. So, the role of technology has been a fundamental pivot to whatever economic activities human beings doing on this planet. Now, a whole chunk of history over centuries, we have seen that a major chunk of economic activity which human beings were doing on the planet was more or less something related to farming, agriculture. uh, Whatever push that we saw in terms of mass manufacturing and industrialization was a contribution of advancement in technology, wherein we saw that when colonials came to India and they sourced back the raw materials and resources to Europe back, uh, they had this advantage of what we call as the Industrial Revolution. Now, there are some references that this technology was something which was unraveled within the Indian subcontinent, and some pieces put together, and new advancements done in Europe, which became the Industrial Revolution. Whatever that be, the fact that more than 50% of the world GDP contribution of India and China came down to 5% because of this piece of technology which now Europe had. So, one unit of a European labor could produce 1,000 times more than an Indian and a Chinese worker or a farmer. This is how Europe was able to harness technology into economics. Post that era, where we saw that the West decided the role of financialization, which Abhishek ji very rightly put out, that there was massive capital infusion into technology and innovation during that period. So that period saw a concentration of financialization role of the West in tech and innovation, supported by endless currency printing of the reserve currency dollar and euro, whereas Asia was given the role of manufacturing, particularly China, mass manufacturing. So this is how the powers that be decided the roles for the West and the remaining world. Now we see that when the baton of leadership went from UK to US, uh, a bunch of companies or aristocrat families who had a role in mercantilism in the previous centuries during the colonial era, now very few hands had access to a huge chunk of money and power. And these very same companies were able to harness this endless printing of currency, which was infused into technology. So when I see it from geopolitics viewpoint, these big companies, they treat nations as portfolio for profits. So they dump the nation at a stage where interest expense crosses the defense spending of that particular country. So we have seen this happening with Britain, this happening with the Dutch, this happening with Portuguese, and we will now see this happening with United States because the interest expense in the economy has crossed the defense spending. Now, when we talk about the algorithm point of this artificial intelligence and how the technology would be used, we have to understand that since these nations are specifically the democracy in the West is highly under the domination of this extreme capitalist, few people making decisions for the masses, uh, there are more downsides with the artificial intelligence algorithms than being the unbiased benefits of AI, which you were mentioning about. Now, when small kids are going to use AI for completing their assignments and probably even giving their exams, if nobody is watching, you can give remote online exam from anywhere. Uh, so I see more of a downside, but uh, if sense prevails uh, and wisdom works, AI is useful as well. So this is the balance that the world needs to seek when they try to regulate this new animal that the world has created. Otherwise, you are going to be in big trouble, because some of the elements of narratives which are being passed on, I can clearly foresee, particularly when I see a lot of capitalists uh, spreading the narrative about universal basic income. Now, this particular concept of universal basic income fundamentally is a acceptance of the fact that you are okay with unproductive chunk of population. Now, when you look at it from 10, 50, 20 years, 30 years, it might look tempting for everyone, and nobody would argue it for political reasons, for social reasons, for personal reasons, and whatnot. And even the capitalists peddling this narrative. But when you look at 100, 200 years, you realize that this very same extreme capitalists who right now promoting this idea of universal basic income would think of uh, you know looking at humans as an unproductive burden, and they would not see any point in why they should be passing on wealth to the state, so that the state can support this universal basic income for the entire chunk of unproductive population that it's going to create. So when I see this news in the West, 4 days a week, 4 hours a week, and this would eventually, when you were trying to make machine factor of production compete with the man factor of production, let me warn the world right now that after tractors were invented, the bulls are immediately being sent to get slaughtered.
Thank you very much for a
Yes.
very brilliant opening on that. And you brought in some significant elements of conversation. And one of them, which I like, is how the narrative, call it algorithm, is being driven by the West and Europe. Eventually, it looks like that the West drives the narrative for everything. There is one of the hidden agendas of AI and its algorithm is about control and manipulation of the rest of the world. And Europe is talking about United States of Europe instead of the fragmented Europe that it is to create a momentum. But here is an important element, and Abhishek ji, I want to have your input on it. When will the East drive the narrative for algorithm and agenda setting? Because what we see here, and Ankit ji was pointing out to that the entire narrative building happens in the West, whether it's the EU, whether it's the US, whether it's IMF, World Bank, creating an institutional aura and framework where we all become subservient to that. So, even the dancers and the actors of, Natu Natu Natu, they were talking about Mecca of award winning. Think about it. His life's ambition was fulfilled because he was winning an Oscar, and he was at Oscar red carpet, and he was talking about Mecca of filmmaking and Mecca of that. My point is, how and when will we, the rest of the non-Europeans and rest of the non-American countries, I'm an American, so I have no hesitation in saying that as a thought-provoking thing, when is the rest of the world going to drive the narrative to using the same tool that's in our control? Because technology is one big thing that flattens the world as we know now.
So you've got a very good question here, and I would just like to go a little back in the history,
Sure.
as well as at whatever Dr. Ankit has just mentioned about it. Um, you must realize or understand that the basic premise of artificial intelligence as I mentioned in my opening statement, is that it is a subset of machine learning. Artificial intelligence doesn't mean that it is intelligent by itself. It does not have any consciousness. And Professor Subhash Kak had very, very well explained in many of his JD appearances before as to what exactly is the concept of consciousness and how the AI actually functions. AI, in the most simplistic terms, is nothing but statistical predictions or understanding the statistical methodology of whatever data that we have. I have personally, I have very minimal understanding of stats and almost zero in finances. But what I do understand is that when you have conventional data sets taken from the, let's say, population cohort, a specific community or a population cohort, and you want to understand what kind of patterns are seen, what kinds of patterns are visible. Uh, let's say extrapolating that to your banking parlance is that whenever you see an uh, account sheet or a balance sheet, you can immediately make out where are the profits, where are the losses, where the money is. You can follow the money trail. So likewise, figuratively speaking, the AI can understand what the patterns are. So, as part of what the extreme capitalism was Dr. Ankit had mentioned, the AI is being repurposed to replace the humans, and they are creating a whole base around universal basic income, what the critics over there in the US call as the depopulation agenda. And to come to your question, after with this background, to come to your question, is that how the West is able to drive the agenda? Is that West has got a beautiful industry academic linkage. The industry primarily sets what it wants, and the academia is able to supply that kind of a human capital or human resource for that. I remember I'll have to go a little technical. In about 2000s, around 2005, 6, there was something what we call as a semantic web search. That is uh, how the terms are interlinked to each other and what kind of inferences that we can draw from each of the uh, terminologies which are scattered across. Like how do you define the linkages between disparate ideas? So the semantic search engine or the semantic search was in thing at that time, around 2005, 6, and 7. And as a result, you ended up seeing a lot of PhDs being churned out. There were a lot of papers, there was a lot of frantic activity. But after the development of natural language processing and after the development of neural nets, and once the computational power became even cheaper, so the idea completely shifted away from the semantic part. So industry no longer wanted those kind of PhDs, and as such, they were completely left redundant. Uh, and last but not the least is the idea of the generative AI, one what we call or very popularly known as the Chat GPT. Is that the idea behind Chat GPT is actually to make the to take away the thinking or the creativity power of the individuals. So whenever we define the pedagogical outcomes, in the simplistic terms, we call as what we call as Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy should turn the learning process towards more creative side, and that is the goal of where we want to define the learning outcomes. But in terms of with the AI coming in, the idea of not only universal basic income, but also to have a depopulation agenda and also to make the people more unproductive. We are completely bypassing the traditional methodologies of learning and creativity and what we call as insight. We are completely replacing that. So the Western idea of extreme capitalism is driving that agenda forward. One. And if you want to look at that, how the East can come up with this kind of a counter narrative, is that we have to copy the idea of industry academia linkage, but we have to define the long-term roadmaps. Let's say that how after a decade, how we want to create, I mean, like what exactly are we looking at, what kind of outputs we want, and what type of learning outcomes do we desire, and what how we can research in the Indian methods of ethics, and what Dr. Ankit has been always talking about his Sanatan economic model. We could have a Sanatan healthcare model. We could have a Sanatan financial model, and it is just not based ourselves, I mean, limiting ourselves to the economics model, but we can have all these ideas integrated to serve our populations. And that's only when the Eastern agenda will dominate the Western narrative. So that's my point.
Thank you. And that's a very important point because I want to come to Ankit with that is that one of the things that is happening with AI is that our life does become easier because 99% of the time we hesitate to make a decision because we don't have enough information or knowledge. AI advances that entire decision making process. Computer bola, yes, do it. It's like that. It's like GPS, you lose the track and then GPS says turn, make a U-turn or go further, and we automatically follow. So are we ending up becoming new modern machines, taking directions from artificial intelligence that tells us what to do? That's very important. The point which I am driven at is that when I was a small kid in Bhagalpur in Bihar, I used to read a comic book called Magnus the Robo Fighter. Google it, you will see it there. Magnus, Magnus, the Robo Fighter. And that was a very interesting thing which I read somewhere else again, that because humans are always biased, we act on instinct and intuition. That has no algorithm yet because all three of us are different here. And all 100 people or 1,000 people watching this, they are all different here. Correct? So, how to bring that masses into the control part? AI then puts us into a funnel. This is the way you are to think. So decision making gets taken away from us and we get funneled in a process through them. So tell us one thing, Ankit here, is that are we losing control or are we becoming the sophisticated zombies because of AI? Because that's where the campaign, political campaign, economic decision making, people saying India is a banana republic, and people saying XYZ. We are coming to that issue very soon. That how does that affect you and I? Because we can think independently. The three of us, I can proudly say we can think independently, but we get circumscribed or become in an absolute minority because we oppose the AI imposed sanction on us. Your thought?
So, so technology, when we look at one phase of it, where we look at the ease of living, when we look at convenience, when we look at the efficiency, because when we're talking about economics, you're always going to look at efficiency, effectiveness, profits, right? These are the criteria. So if that is the only goal, uh, then I'm afraid, Vibhutiji, a lot too many of masses, because most of the tasks that people do in their routine life can certainly be standardized. So as many tasks that you can standardize with step 1, step 2, and step 3, if that steps can be defined, um, then I feel that a massive chunk of human population will be totally out of work, because the routine task would not require those kind of creativity or insight level for decision making, which and I believe technology can immediately catch that up. So if you're looking at that kind of a thing, I can give you an example. After the Google search engine that we all use today, uh, and the smartphones that we carry today, how many of us can remember 10 phone numbers? No one, right? So I can measure and tell you that about 25 to 30% of memory loss we are already facing as humans. So after the smartphones and the Google search engine that has come. So you have to imagine the speed with which we are degrading the the genes and the DNA human material that is, because a damage to your memory is a very big damage. It's not some small damage. Now, if you're looking at only efficiency and ease of use and convenience, then this is the cost probably you have agreed to pay for it, right? So, these are the downsides that you have. So, my understanding of the Sanatan economics model, which I am also creating at this point in time, I believe when we look at the four main factors of production: man, machine, market, and money, I believe that the man factor of production should always be at the center of the economic decisions that you make, even as a society, as a government, and as the business owner as well. So I believe technology should be complementary and enhancing the efficiency of the manufacturer production and not competing with him. So if the machine factor of production is intent on competing with the manufacturer of production, then be rest assured the state is not going to take such a huge burden of unproductive population, which means that the state will have to follow the Karl Marx theory of sucking the profits of this extreme capitalist, and the extreme capitalists who are going to pay via state this freebies, they are not going to let you be alive, right? So I'm telling you, there will be more train derailing in Ohio and California and where not. Those chemicals will spill down, and these are all just incidents. Okay, nobody is doing it. These are all incidents. So
So
yeah,
now, from being a, you are famous, notorious, and loved because of your predictive ability. And now that you are talking about the depopulation in those measures, I think you are scaring the hell of a lot of people. Like the state will do the Marxian theology of reducing the population because the
so
state can't handle more, or
I
the
mean,
as the saying
and
goes, the
I
state
have
can't handle the stupid.
and and I have empirical proof for it. I mean, if Karl Marx came up with this theory of redistribution of wealth, it was because he was at the receiving end of extreme industrialization which Europe saw. So he was correct. He was trying to talk redistribution of wealth only because extreme capitalists pushed the society to a point where the exploitation was unbearable, right? So every time a capitalist is only looking for profits to extreme ends, then we are going to come to scenarios where Karl Marxes will be born, who will say, hey, this is too much injustice, let's redistribute the wealth. So every time this is going to be a repeat cycle. And this is very scary because, as I told you, this capitalist won't like to bear the cost of unproductive masses and state taking that money from them and redistributing them. So, which is why I say that the Sanatan economics model is the only way to go forward, because Karl Marx is trying to bring a solution to an exploitation which has already happened. So he is actually trying to bring a corrective control, right? What I am saying is the Sanatan economics model will be a preventive control. If you have a dharmic cap on profits, if you make the man factor of production at the center, and other factors of production are second class to him, I think we can gain a balance where we won't require socialist freebies to be distributed, which is why I say that uh, when we talk about this four factors of production and economics, we have to focus on the Sanatan economics objective of preserving the life cycle, the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom and humans, because Sanatan Dharma never talked about separating animal lives from human lives. I mean, human rights and animal rights are separate. This is a Western concept of all the international bodies that came up recently with these ideas. In Indian subcontinent, dharmas never differentiated between animals and humans, or even the plant kingdom, right? Our Shulba Shastra talks about plants not just having life, they even dissected what kind of plants have what number of senses in them. So that's 2,500 years back. So, the dharmas have never differentiated between animal, plant, and human kingdom, right? So if you want to go back to those preservation of life cycles, then Sanatan economics is the only model which can balance out everything and preserve.
I don't know whether it's a Guru Shishya tradition, but you are echoing my words, which I have said on Jaipur Dialogues many times. And Sanjay ji will be a living witness to the fact that I have said many times for the last 3 years that the era belongs to Sanatan, is for us to carry the message forward. And I also use the word efficiency and effectiveness. And I have said this in my programs, in my work, we do that the machine era is the manufacturing era, the industrial revolution of the olden time, focused on efficiency, assembly line. Today, we live in a world of coordination. We are living in a world of coordination, collaboration, technologies. And thus, effectiveness is more important than efficiency alone. So efficiency and effectiveness needs to be the buzzword for managements going forward. So thank you, Ankit ji, for supporting me. You make me feel young again, that I was not off the rail in thinking the way I was thinking.
So these thoughts, Vibhuti ji, uh, because I'm speaking on many channels, I know this. The ramblings of these thoughts were running and are running on a huge chunk of
Right.
on the minds of huge chunk of population worldwide. But to channelize and regulate and show some practical stuff out of it is what people are waiting for, because at the
Totally
end of the
correct.
day, if I am going to tell Atithi Devo Bhava as a social welfare, now practically I can't tell people to allow unknown people to enter their house and they are going to serve the food, right,
Right.
at this day and age. So basically what we need to reach at is the intent of ancient India systems.
Right.
If not, we are not talking about copy paste, we are saying at least we can reach the intent uh, via policies, incentives and stuff like that, instead of a state control or a regulatory method.
You are absolutely right that there has to be Atithi Devo doesn't mean that in Ankit's wedding, there is an invite for 1,000 people and 10,000 can gate crash. Those are called wedding crashes. So, there is always a rule and discipline for doing something. Yes, to the invitees who made the guest list, the drink and food is free, but not for everybody who walks in to have a free drink and free food, right? So that's what is important here. And Abhishek ji, I'm coming to you with this thought process that, coming to discuss about democracy, and I said it in my opening, that democracy is a chaotic form of governance. There are so many parameters that go into, managing democracy. Do you see that AI-driven tools will be able to manipulate voters, manipulate opinions? And we know the social media tools which are now driving even chaos, even more aggressively. So, Peter Thiel talking about the fact that, this particular SVB will have stress on its balance sheet, led to the depositors going to First Republic. So you had a social media driven panic. So we are talking about a very, very challenging scenario where information spreads like wildfire, literally and figuratively speaking. So where do we go from here? How does one manage that managing of democracy, as the saying goes? Go ahead.
As again, it requires very deep deliberation. I would
Yeah.
actually continue with what Dr. Ankit has just mentioned about it. He was mentioning, I was also taking notes at the same time. So, what we have shifted towards is the attention economy. How much attention we pay to the notifications is what determines the complete valuations of the big tech, uh, whether it's WhatsApp, Instagram, or anything. Of course, the larger discussion has been always done by Ankitji on how the fiat currency has been driving up the bubble in that technology sector. Dr. Ankit knows that I take notes while he's talking on different channels. So that's how I can regurgitate this more effectively. But coming back to the attention economy, it's like the artificial intelligence has definitely become our overlord. We have people for like the closest example that comes is the cab hailing applications. I'm not naming any specific companies, but everybody knows that nobody has ever seen who organizes the cabs, and the cab drivers don't know whom they work for. So the cab hailing applications are the closest what we call as the AI overlord, and how they determine the let's say the livelihood of people who are dependent on that. And if you want to drill down more technically, is that they have the complete demand projection of the requirement for transports. They know where people live, how they want to navigate, what kind of waking hours, working hours does that neighborhood have, what is the congregation of the people in the particular thing, and all of that technology flowed from the earlier 2000s. The fiasco of hyper-local deliveries and hyper-local services. And I can see the history repeating now that everybody wants to deliver convenience as a product. So there are two things which are parallel here. One is the attention economy, where everybody is making their valuations, billions of dollars of valuations. It's mind-boggling. And second is the projection of the convenience. Now, the third factor is that we are all attuned and conditioned to believe that the AI will respond, or something will definitely pop up as a recommendation. So, does this video pop up as a recommendation on YouTube? Uh, how does the Instagram know that it has to recommend the next possible reel? So, attention economy, working for the AI overlords, people being conditioned to believe, and now the recommendation. So, all of these three disparate things can impact the human mind. It We are conditioned now to believe that this is what the new normal is, new normative is, and to cement that. Let's say the privacy was one of the most important currency that the individual has. There's a lot of hue and cry about the privacy breaches that happen. But now they are making it a new normal. Like everybody is conditioned to believe that in the world to go by, privacy breaches will remain. They will. That means the loss of your data will be a part and parcel of your existence. And we don't see any criminal blowbacks. We don't see any change in the behavior of the corporation despite the fines being put by European Union. I mean, host of regulatory issues. So, which means that companies have now attuned themselves to doing this as a cost of business, the fines, the privacy breaches, attention economy, AI overloads, and conditioning of the people. So all of this background now gets me to your question, is that how this will impact the democracy. So the simplest application, and I would like to rail against WhatsApp, is that the WhatsApp, identifies your trigger points. It identifies your motivational factors. It identifies your emotional responses to whatever is being forwarded, whatever is being shared in groups, whatever is being shared in the so-called community aspects. And once they have the complete database from Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and host of other applications, uh, these big corporations, they suck out huge amount of data through the advertising, what we call as the software development kits, SDKs. So they suck out all the data and the privacy breaches. So you combine all of these ideas together and then uh, come to a conclusion about how the mind of the individual is being shaped. So this will reflect in the way you see the advertisements, and this will reflect in the way you go out and vote whenever you are going out in the vote. Basically, it's about the perception management. And one simplest example, or the most crude example that comes to my mind right now, right away, is the so-called scandal of Cambridge Analytica, which harvested all the data from Facebook and other internet resources. And that was in 2014, 15, and 16. And they managed to create complete data sets of population cohorts, uh, whereas they could predict with reasonable accuracy that how that population cohort will uh, vote for a particular candidate. So you could speak that language to that particular population cohort. And for the viewers, for the benefit of the viewers, Vibhuti ji is himself a politician. So he knows fully well the importance of tailoring the uh, tailoring the speech or the conversation depending on the context and depending on the people to whom it has to be addressed. So for a particular mindset of people, you can't speak something which is which you know that they will not like. I mean, you can come in with any number of examples. So there is no, to conclude, there is no black and white in AI, democracy, or any of the impacts on economic productivity. It is it is a continuum of shades of gray, and people will pick up the shade of gray to which they identify themselves the most. If it is a lighter gray, then yes, okay, it may suit them their political agendas, and then argue endlessly about it. And if it is towards the darker gray, like people wading into conspiracy theories, well, then they're going to argue from their particular standpoint. And AI can itself generate a counter AI, which is again very scary, but also extremely fascinating part of research as well. That uh, how do you define thinking, and how you are able to impact the thinking on a population scale? If I may add a little bit, is that the CIA was very much interested in these mind-bending experiments in 60s and 70s, where they experimented with a lot of psychotropic substances, including LSD and all the cannabis, marijuana. And that's why you end up seeing a lot of quite a, spirited debate in the US, especially about growing your own marijuana or legalizing pot. Uh, but the genesis of all those psychotropic, mind-bending, mind-numbing experiments and the current AI of population control in any way was as a result of the experiments done way back in 50s and 60s. So so back and forth, if you look at, there's a lot of continuum of shades of gray. So you can pick whichever color you want. As long as you can pick up any color as long as it is gray.
Well,
Sorry for
thank you,
the Hindi
thank you,
quote.
doctor. Thank you, doctor, for letting out a secret that I am also a
Yes.
politician in addition to everything else. But my essential avatar is of the banker. And as a banker, it is something very fascinating. You realize some things later in your life. Like one of the key elements of my personality has been always asking questions, getting to know. So when I was working in exchange control department in Bangalore in RBI, my entire purpose was, hey, why are we doing what we are doing? You know, whether keeping the passport for GR form waivers, whether how much exchange control we should release. You are always asking questions to know things. Fast forward to my American Express avatar. You did not give money because somebody had money in the bank. The project had to be viable, right? It had the capacity to pay money back. So you ask questions, all kinds of things. So I'm used to asking questions, and I will continue to ask questions. Inconvenient it may be for anybody. So Ankitji, I'm coming to you for a very important point with Abhishekji to piggybacking on that is the element of control, how advanced AI will get, because there was a very important element that is removing the human bias from decision making and making life comfortable and convenient, right? So what happens is that you create a robo of robots who devoids himself with emotional and biased decision making. That will lead to creation of the monsters of what you call AI, you know, robots that will tell you that no, you are thinking wrong. And we saw that in the movie AI. That is very important to. At what point in time will the human mind makers and algorithm designers draw a Lakshman Rekha in designing the algorithm for AI? Think about it. There has to be a line drawn before something goes out of control. You are mute. You are mute.
Vibhutiji, the unfortunate part is that those who need to, those who are charged with governance, those guys and the governance structure below up to the last person, uh, they are not the ones who are equipped to match the speed with which technology is being developed outside of their awareness.
Mm.
And by the time the governance people are getting some information, it is almost the point of incident. It is never a point where they are being asked when something is being developed, right? So if when you look at this dichotomy, what you realize is specifically this is not just about the kind of manipulation. If somebody is having a complete access to the kind of discussions that I do on social media, they can already make out that I'm going to vote Modi ji in 2024, right? So tomorrow, if a company or those handlers of technology are going to shut my social media accounts, wherein I've been talking about what I understand about politics, uh, then it's a big impact. So it's almost like you're trying to meddle in the election process, and that is going to be the next governance, right? Which is supposed to keep an oversight on these very same guys. So you understand the vicious cycle over here. So it's not just about stopping my access. It can almost go to a point where they have a complete data of set of people who also believe in a similar ideology, and they can shut us up. Who knows, they can shut us up even from voting one fine day. So you never know what kind of boundaries technology can cross, and we've already seen WhatsApp reports on WhatsApp where uh, the report says that just prior to the 2019 election, WhatsApp came up with this rule that you can do forwards to only one person at a time. So the entire give and take which was happening on WhatsApp about how good the performance of the Modi government was in the first term was in effect cut down because of this technology control that they had. and that to a control which was outside of this nation, right? So you imagine the kind of damaging effect technology can have once you have a massive chunk of population using it. And we have seen the Chinese Communist Party playing up all their applications like TikTok and whatnot, collecting the profile and the likes and dislikes of a massive chunk of foreign population, collecting that data, and who knows what with what intent they are collecting that kind of data. So tomorrow, if on some of the social media following or influencer says something on internet, and imagine if that can channelize a crowd of 1 lakh 2 lakh with that fake information and cause chaos and protest in your country. So I believe that all the factors of production need to have an oversight from the governance, which is unbiased, and with a national security, uh, kind of an intent within that apparatus, outside of this entire public domain regulation and governance which the governments do. Because basically what you are doing with technology is you are erasing the physical security of the borders of the nations, which means no more a country needs to war at the border. They've already entered in like a Trojan horse, and you would know the result later. I mean, we already know how technology was used to prop up many of the artificial protests in India, right? So all these kind of usages are possible with technology, which is going to be very difficult, particularly even more so if the country is not having its own their own businessmen handling this technology stuff. So if it's a foreign technology or a foreign application which your population is addicted on for usage, then it is even more dangerous than some nationalist businessmen providing that access or a technology platform.
Thank you. You made my life easier by making the segue into the political dimensions of 2024, which is what I wanted to spend the last few minutes on. Is the fact that with knowing what we know now, as my favorite phrase is, knowing what we know now, do you think India is going to experience a tough time, or not only India, even the US elections in 2024, UK elections in 2024, but specifically with reference to India? Do you foresee, Abhishek ji and Ankit ji, both of you, challenges that the Modi government will face, dealing with the entire uproar that Rahul Chacha does, or Pappu does, or whatever his chamchas do, all these kind of stuff, or the Khalistan movement, or the Islamist movement. For example, there are so many people are raising the bogey of fear against Modi, against us Hindus, like as if we are the ultimate evil in the world. So that kind of a narrative, how do you see it needs to be shaped up? And I'm saying this also because we do sincere work with corporations, which is titled as Communicating in a Digital Era. And it's not about communicating with masses or employees, but even interpersonal communication, because that's where everything begins and happens. So in the last few minutes, Abhishek ji, you take the shot. And I wanted to tell the audience and to both of you, surprise announcement, is that this conversation is not the beginning and the end of all it. This needs to be had over and over a period of time. So I want to send you a blanket invitation that let's continue this dialogue of educating people of the fears and the challenges and opportunities that exist using the same technology, because it's a tool and that tool has to be used. So Abhishek ji, you go first.
I would only add to what Dr. Ankit has very clearly mentioned about the importance of regulation and the ethics and the biases which are creeping into the AI applications. Uh, my bigger concern right now is on the generative AI. Generative AI involves the ChatGPT, for example. Although if you adopt a reductionist approach to the entire ChatGPT thing, a reductionist approach means that you are breaking it down in the simplest of the things. Then ChatGPT is nothing but a statistical correlation of what will appear in the future. That is, what word will appear uh, next to the entire sentence that is being framed. But you must realize that the generative AI or the AI doesn't exactly know what it is saying, what we call as the AI-based hallucinations. The reason why I'm saying this is, or why I'm telling you this is that generative AI can be used to completely wipe off the entire history of a country. We are dependent on our text, for example. The Indian history is dependent on text, written words, spoken or transmitted words in the Guru Shishya Parampara. And it depends on the preservation of knowledge depends on this particular oral transmission, and there's so many other ways and means to go about it. But when you have an AI generating something out of nothing, and out of like what Dr. Ankit very always mentions, the fiat currency printing something out of thin air. So it will create massive amounts of confusion. So it is going to become super easy to set up websites, to set up fake news, fake uh, what do you say, fake videos, fake events. You can concoct out in whatever manner you want. You can shape your AI to generate completely fake narratives and completely fake history. So that is what is going to happen. This is what was also mentioned in Mr. Rajiv Malhotra's book on AI in five battlegrounds, where he had specifically mentioned about the threats to the Indian or the Indic narrative and civilization. That is one thing. So going forward, I think it is going to really impact the democracy and the political discourse uh, for the countries which are going to go for the elections, UK, US, and India. And in the era of lax regulation, where the regulation has not stepped up with the technological developments, this is a matter of grave concern for each one of us involved. We need to be aware of how the algorithms impact us in many subtle ways and take steps to reduce the usage of the big tech. That is one aspect that I can say. I can't, it has become so intertwined, but we need to have consciousness and awareness of the fact that this impacts us negatively in many subtle ways. It doesn't become apparent. It's like smoking, primarily smoking.
Thank
It
you.
may give you a temporary high.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Ankitji, I will come back to the last question. Please sum it up in a minute. It will be easy for you. Do you think the AI, humans always want trust, transparency, and truth? Do you think AI will do that? Or will it confuse, create chaos, and create more muddled conversation?
You want me to predict?
Yes, go ahead. Make my
I'm
day.
I'm not sure about the West. I'm not sure about the
I
West.
said mine, not West.
Uh, so I do understand that this our land, the Indian subcontinent, is the only one which can guide and give the real principles on how to just not just about this how to use technology and have a Bharatiya style of technology format which does not impede on the rights of humans or animals or other forms of life, but also about natural resources. So I would suggest that it is India's duty to take the guiding path forward for the rest of the world. I'm not going to expect from one life concept countries to have that kind of wisdom. No.
That's brilliantly said, and that India has to take the leadership role. And there are times when you accept leadership or leadership is thrust on you. And that's what is important for India to recognize that. So, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, thank you, Ankit, and thank you, Abhishek. I take the pride in saying, dropping you G behind your names. It is a real pleasure to have this conversation. To the viewers, I wanted to say, we know a lot. The computers, these instruments have made things very easy for us. वो कहते हैं कि information हमारी मुट्ठी में है अब, दुनिया हमारी मुट्ठी में है. करना क्या है इसके लिए हमें सोचना है. 2024 elections is going to be very critical for all of us. How are we going to use the available information and technology for the right thing? That is our dharma. That is the promotion of our own and establishment of the Sanatan. That's what we have to think about. It's not about you and I. It was actually and authentically about one sun, one earth, one grid. It is like we have to understand that sun, moon, water don't have religion stamped on it. That's Sanatan. And I wanted you to embrace that. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Ankit, once again. Please like, subscribe, and share our channel. Support us, Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue in India. And let's carry the message forward and the battle forward. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.